just really looking for speakers who challenge us to think differently or give us something different that we can go add to our day. And I think this is a session that you can immediately go back to your work and start applying some of the tips and tricks he will be sharing with you on today's Lunch and Learn. A little bit about Andrew is that he's the CEO of Humor That Works, helping professionals use humor to improve communication, collaboration, and results. He's a former project manager at Procter and Gamble. He has worked with over 800 plus organizations, including Microsoft, NASA, and the FBI. He's a best-selling author, and he's a top TEDx speaker with 15 million views currently. Andrew really brings a practical, engaging approach to making our project work better and more fun, if you ask me. Andrew, please take it away and help us improve our communication with confidence and humor.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Florence, for the warm introduction. Thank you all for joining wherever it is you are joining from. I'm going to go ahead and spotlight my camera just so you all can see me well. And yeah, I'm excited to chat with you today about a topic that personally I think could potentially have the power to help change your work, your relationships, and the way that those things intersect with each other. Now, hopefully today is not your normal kind of Teams meeting. We do want to make it a little bit of interactive, of course. If we're talking about humor, we want to make it a little bit of fun as well. One of the things that we're going to be doing is taking advantage of the chat for that. So just to warm up the fingers just a little bit as we're coming out of whatever meetings you might have been in before, go ahead and drop in the chat where you're joining from physically. Where are you located? I know we got some people from PMI-CIC. We got some people from PMI-LA. I think I heard someone out there in Phoenix as well. So go ahead and drop in the chat where you're joining from. So we got San Diego. Fantastic. I'll be out in San Diego in just about a month speaking at a conference there. LA, California representing, Las Vegas as well. Illinois, Peoria, Normal, Illinois, which is one of my favorite city names, although I've never been Normal, nor have I been to Normal. But I love it. What a fantastic array of people we have. While you're go ahead and typing, go ahead and share where you're joining from mentally today. How you feeling? It's Tuesday, it's the middle of the day, or maybe earlier morning for people on the West Coast. But are you curious? Are you excited? Are you a little bit hungry or stressed out from the things that you have going on? Just where you're joining from mentally, because I think it's important to take a quick stock of everything, feeling busy, feeling excited, feeling I need a little bit of coffee, all of the above. Fantastic. Well, we're going to be, like I said, we're going to be taking advantage of the chat to kind of create a little bit of engagement, but also get a little bit of that back and forth to understand where things are for you right now. Now, to understand why this is a topic, this topic of humor is one that I think is worth talking about, I want to take you back to my first year on the job at P&G. And so just so you notice, I'll be using slides kind of in my picture-in-picture view. If it's not already done, my camera should be pinned for you. You can also right-click on my camera and or my video and select Fit to Frame if you're not seeing the entire set of the slides, but you're welcome to do that. And as mentioned, so as I want to get you started, I want to take you back to first year on the job at P&G where I was an IT project manager. And I remember about a year into my job finding myself in a room very, very much like this one. And I was in a meeting that was just so, I mean, the nicest way to say it is boring. Like, I don't know, go ahead and give me a Y for yes in a chat. If you all have ever been in a meeting that was so dry, it made you want to cry. Let me know if you've also kind of felt that, right? Yeah, so many of people have been that. Like, and it was one of those meetings where I started daydreaming about things I wish I could be doing instead of being in that meeting, you know, and they weren't even exciting things. They were like, you know what, I'd rather be folding laundry right now. Although some of you might have cameras off because maybe you're folding laundry. I don't know. I remember in that particular meeting, I was thinking like, you know what, maybe I should schedule a root canal just so I feel something, right? And I could tell looking around the room that I wasn't the only one feeling this way about the meeting because the woman next to me had written the word blah on her notepad and she was just circling it over and over again. And the biggest problem with this particular meeting, as Pamela is maybe going to kind of feel my pain with, is that the problem with this meeting was that I was the one leading the meeting. And in the middle of talking, while I was so bored, I had this realization where I was like, if I'm bored while talking, the audience has to be bored while listening. And admittedly, it started to make me a little bit flustered, and I ended the meeting a little bit early and was just kind of done. And I was just like, what is going on? Like, how can I be bored at a thing that I am supposed to be leading? And I freaked out a little bit. My manager was in the room, and he kind of pulled me aside and he was like, hey, what's going on? And I told him, like, I just couldn't get through it anymore. Like, I had all the facts, I had all the information I was supposed to share with everyone, but it wasn't really landing for me, and it wasn't landing for other people. And then he said something to me that I didn't quite expect. He was like, Andrew, what happened to the Microsoft Paint guy? Which, for context, maybe doesn't make too much sense for you, but about a year earlier, before I had been hired at P&G, I was an intern there. And at the end of my summer, when I was an intern there, I had to present to a review board of the senior leaders who were ultimately going to decide whether or not I could get hired full time. And so for me at the time, it was the most important presentation I had ever given, because I grew up lower middle class in Cincinnati, Ohio, and neither of my parents had college degrees. And so to get a job at P&G was basically to have this feeling that I'd be quote unquote set for life, that I was going to be challenged in a role, I would have a stable career, I was going to have a salary that was higher than either of my parents' starting salaries as well. Like, my starting salary was higher. And so this was a big deal for me to try to get this presentation, or this job. And so I spent weeks on the presentation. I rehearsed it, I polished the data, I made sure every single slide was perfect and professional and buttoned up. And then the night before that presentation, I took one look at the presentation and realized, like, oh, this is going to bore them to death, right? It might not be a review board presentation. It is going to be a different kind of board. And so as an intern, so I had a little bit of this experience. And I was like, okay, what if I did something different? What if I make it a little bit more fun? And so the night before, I scrapped the entire presentation and I rebuilt it in Microsoft Paint. And I shared the story of my projects using just Microsoft Paint. And the presentation ended in what I think was my greatest masterpiece, which was this one. A hand-drawn, visually accurate representation of the stick figures that day. And I can tell you that creating an entire presentation out of Microsoft Paint is not very efficient. But it is effective because it gets people to pay attention. And afterwards, even one of the associate directors who was on the review board pulled me aside and he was like, you know, you're pretty good at PowerPoint. And joking with him, I was like, I like to try to think I excel at it. And he was like, was that a Microsoft Office pun? I was like, word. And 2 days later, I found out that I got the job. Like I said, it wasn't efficient, but it was effective. And that's what my manager was talking about. After that boring meeting, when he asked, he's like, what happened to the Microsoft Paint guy? He was wondering, like, what went wrong, right? That intern presentation was one of the most effective, most entertaining things that I had done, and yet suddenly I let that go. And what had happened, at least for me, was that I had decided that I needed to be serious, that I needed to be taken seriously as a professional. And so I had started burying everything that made me effective. I defaulted to being efficient. I had clean slides, I covered all the material, I tried to hit every single bullet point. Woman next to me, as a result, was writing the word blah. I was bored in my own meetings. And I think many of us go through some similar version of this. I don't think I'm alone, right? At some point, we get this message that being a professional somehow means being serious. But that's not true. And that moment of my manager pulling me aside and asking me about Microsoft Paint sent me down a path I never expected. I spent the next 15 years researching the gap between being competent, being good at what you do, versus being compelling, right? Having expertise, but turning that into impact. The difference between doing the work and having the work actually lead to results. And that research has led to a partnership with the University of Northern Colorado, a framework validated by more than 10,000 people, worked with over 700 organizations around the world, including NASA, Microsoft, and Google, and a TEDx talk that's been viewed more than 16 million times. And what all that taught me is that this gap between competence and impact isn't about expertise. It's not always even about preparation or working harder. In some ways, it is about humor. And I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do the entire presentation in Microsoft Paint again. I have learned that that takes way too much time. So instead, we're talking about humor. And ultimately, that's what we're going to discuss today, how you can use humor as a project manager to communicate better, connect closer, and be a little bit more confident. Okay, so that's the goal for today. Now, if we are talking about humor, I think it's important that we start first with a disclaimer. So if you all could read that and hit I accept, that would be great. Basically, the too long didn't read summary version of that is to say a couple of things. The first thing is to say that, first of all, today is not just about being a comedy show, right? The goal is not to just make you laugh. Now, we are talking about humor, so hopefully we do have a little bit of fun, but rather it's about how to teach you to use humor as an intentional skill. The second thing that I think is worth clarifying is that I recognize that I do not work in your role. I don't work at your company. I don't know what your organization is like. I don't know what level of humor you already use. All I know is that what I've shared today, what I'm sharing today is something that we've taught to organizations all around the world on how to be more effective. And so, not every single thing that I'm going to say is going to resonate with you or be even possible maybe in your environment. But the goal is just to, one, give you a little bit of a new awareness around the value of humor as a professional skill. Two, to give you a couple of shared language idea, common vocabulary that you can start to incorporate and use yourself. And three, give you a little bit of inspiration, permission to start using humor later today, if you would like. Because if you get this right, the results come. Your presentations get acted on instead of just dying in the room. You become a lot more credible, you become more compelling, and in process, you also become more confident. That's what's waiting on the other side of learning this skill. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So why humor? And also what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to set up headphones right now because I did notice the chat, people talking a little bit about static. Let me know if that static is still happening once I plug these in, but hopefully we can kind of make that switch. But while I'm doing that, go ahead and drop in the chat. Go ahead and share on a scale of 1 to 10 how important humor is in your work. Actually, we'll do 1 to 5. Sorry, 1 to 5. 1 to 5, how important is humor in your work? A 1 is that it's not important at all. In fact, you think it's a detriment. And a 5 is that it's incredibly important, critical to how you get stuff done. Go ahead and drop that in the chat. Okay. Give you a moment. I'm going to set this up. Let's see. Okay, good. And then let me know if you still hear static at this point. We've now switched sides. All right. So what am I seeing in the chat? We've got 4s, 5s, a couple of 1s, 2, 3s. We got a whole range across the board. Okay, well, the goal for today is that if any of you are lower than a 5, my hope is that we at least nudge you a little bit higher on that scale. Because I understand the 1s, the 2s, the 3. Okay, the static is still there. That might One, two, nope. Now you can't hear me. Okay, now I should be good. See if it's better, if it's still the static or not. All right, so this is how you know I have a computer science background, is that I can't just let it be. I'm like, I need to troubleshoot while I'm talking. Let's do presentations and IT. Okay, we'll give it a shot. So yeah, if you're a 1, 2, or 3, I understand where that comes from, because so often we've learned to kind of suppress a little bit the personality side of us, right? That because we want to be professional, right? The goal or what we're taught is that you work hard, you be prepared, and you let the quality of the work speak for itself. Give me a Y for yes in the chat if you have ever had that same expression or that same feeling where you're kind of like, I don't want to toot my own horn or anything like that. Instead, the work should speak for itself, right? Let me know if you've ever had kind of that feeling. Because I, as an engineer, that's what I thought. right? The work is good enough. I don't need to sell it. I don't need to go overboard. I don't want to toot my own horn. There's some people who all they do is talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. I want to focus on walking the walk. Yeah, you've all had that experience before, right? Problem is that it doesn't actually work. It felt like it was enough, but at some point, maybe in a meeting with a client, maybe in a presentation, maybe talking with your team, you probably got the sense that something wasn't landing, that something wasn't quite landing the way it should. And the reason is because we get so absorbed of this big belief that professional has to mean serious, and that using humor means that you don't take your work seriously. That the things that actually make people pay attention and remember what you said, things like humor, a little bit of levity, something a little bit different, that those are somehow not professional. And no one ever really sat you down and said, hey, stop being interesting. It probably happened gradually. You probably watched what other people above you did and you started to mirror it. If your manager never used humor, you maybe thought it was never welcome. If you enter a culture where people aren't necessarily laughing and smiling a lot of the time, you might have felt like this is a place that I can't do it. In fact, we ran a study on this. We wanted to understand why don't people use more humor in the workplace. And so we asked nearly 1,000 professionals what prevents them from using humor. Drop in the chat, what do you think was the number one reason why people don't use humor more? What might hold people back? What do you think is the number one reason why people didn't use humor more? Right? People wouldn't take them seriously, that they have some type of judgment. Right? There's harassment concerns, right? Maybe you offend someone or something like that. Cultural differences, fear of some sort, right? Yeah, the number one reason, at least in our study, why people didn't use humor more was they thought that their boss or coworkers wouldn't approve. That was the number one reason, right? Absolutely. There's a question on some people didn't know how. Some people were worried that they didn't think that it was appropriate. Some people said that they didn't have time. But the number one reason was that they didn't think that their boss or coworkers would approve, which maybe speaks a little bit to like maybe I offend someone or maybe I'm not taking seriously. But that's not a skill problem in terms of using humor. It's a permission one. And some of you might even be thinking like, well, we have actually a pretty good culture. People laugh, we have fun, and that's fantastic. That's not true for every organization. But there is a difference between humor happening around you by happenstance and humor being something that you use intentionally. Most organizations might have pockets of fun, but we're talking about humor as a professional skill that anyone can develop. And the reason for this is because of everything that we've talked about so far, most people default to being efficient, right? Which I get. I'm an engineer. I'm obsessed with efficiency to the point that I was born 3 weeks early. So apparently even in the womb, it's like, I don't need a full 9 months. I'm ready to go right now. I'm also someone who listens to podcasts at 2x speed because not only is it faster, but also more people sound like me, right? Like I understand the desire, the need to be efficient. Problem is that when something isn't landing, sometimes our default mindset is like, oh, I got to be more efficient. I've got to have better bullet points, sharper credentials, more data, more preparation. The reality is it's not about being efficient with humans. It's about being effective. It's about finding ways to respond to connection, to building energy, to creating surprise, to doing the things that actually make them look up from their phones or out of their inboxes. Because most of our time is spent optimizing efficiency. And that's what I was doing in that meeting. I was trying to be as efficient as possible with all of my material, and it turns out it was incredibly boring. But when you start looking at the organizations that get good results, you start to realize that they do things a little bit differently. That's what I found. The organizations that are sometimes most associated with rigor and precision, zero margin for error, groups like NASA, the military, the Red Cross, they don't treat humor as an opposite of serious work. They use it deliberately, which means that the idea that professional environments have to be humorless isn't a fact, it's a belief. And I can prove this to you with a very simple, very important, very dumb question. Okay? I want you all to answer this in the chat. It's a very simple, very important, but like I said, very dumb question. I recognize that, but it's still an important one. So go ahead and answer in the chat. Would you rather do something that is fun or not fun? Let me know what you think. Drop it in the chat. Let's see what you think. Say fun, 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 fun in all caps, fun with exclamation points, fun, of course, right? 99.9% of humans say fun. Is there anyone that's like not fun? Yeah, Fred is like not fun. Fred's one of those, must be one of those people, probably joking, but might be one of those people that's like, ugh, I hate feeling joy in my body, right? No, most people choose fun. So it stands to reason then, if you were to make your emails say just a little bit more fun, would people be more likely to read them? Or for you to make your meetings just a little bit more fun, would people be more likely to pay attention? If you were to make your own work, your own projects just a little bit more fun, would you be more engaged and do them better? And the answer is yes. There's research that shows there's over 30 benefits to using humor in the workplace backed by research, case studies, and real world examples. And they range from impressive things like reducing stress to getting people to listen to building trust to even burning calories and increasing happiness. Now, I'm not suggesting that humor is the only way to achieve some of these benefits, right? You listen to some productivity gurus on social media and they'll say things like, hey, the secret to being productive, here's what you do. First of all, you got to wake up every single day at 4 o'clock in the morning. Then you do 7 shots of espresso followed by 3 hours of high intensity CrossFit yoga training. You do 2 hours of deep breathing mindfulness meditation, and then you microdose just a little bit of LSD and you'll be 0.7% more productive. Like, that might be true. I don't know. But you could also just laugh a little bit more. You could also just use humor a little bit more intentionally. Like, humor is not the only way to achieve these things, but I do think that it is one of the most fun. So for the rest of our time, I want to explore, what does that actually look like? How do you develop this skill? Because humor is a skill, which means that it can be learned, right? And I know that it can be learned. And in many ways, it's kind of like learning a new language. Go ahead and drop in the chat how many languages you speak. Drop in the chat how many languages you speak. For my computer science engineers out there, I'm talking about human languages, so HTML, C++, Python, etc. Those do not count. Talking human languages, so 2, 3. You all are, many of you are very impressive. I like it. Danielle speaks human and cat. 1.02. That 0.02 is kind of how I feel a little bit about my Spanish, right? For sure. So I am like most stereotypical Americans that I only speak one language. And it took me going to the UK to realize that I don't even speak English. I speak American, right? But I am trying to learn German because my wife is German. She's the first German person I've ever dated. It is the most efficient relationship that I have ever been in. It's truly wonderful. And my wife's name is Sabrina, but because she is German, my nickname for her is Pretzel. Because the way I see it is that my favorite thing, before I met her, my favorite thing from Germany was pretzels, and now she's my favorite thing. So I call her Pretzel. And we have a 4.5-year-old daughter, and my wife and daughter speak exclusively German with each other. And I realized, like, okay, I need to learn German because I don't like that they have a secret language between each other. And so I'm doing everything that I can to learn the language. I'm on Duolingo every single day. We watch German films on Netflix. I'm eating a whole bunch of sauerkraut, just in case that helps for some reason. And a little while back, we were visiting my wife's family, Pretzel's family, in Germany. And she gave me a challenge. She's like, hey, you're doing Duolingo every day. We're watching stuff. She was like, but if you really want to learn the language, you have to actually put it into practice. And so I agree with that. And she's like, you have to have conversations. But I didn't want to have a conversation with any of her relatives because I wanted them to still like me afterwards, not sound too much like an idiot. And so like, okay, I'll have a conversation with a stranger while I'm in Germany. It'll be a good practice. But I was nervous about it, so I kept putting it off. And eventually, we were getting ready to leave Germany to go on a holiday to Switzerland. And my wife, Pretzel, was like, you know, you're running out of time. You said you would do this. And so I thought about it, and I was like, okay, I know what I'd do. When we get to the hotel in Switzerland, I'm just going to have a conversation with the receptionist in German. Because first of all, I feel like it's a pretty transactional conversation, right? I've checked into thousands of hotels in my lifetime. They're pretty easy to do. Like, I'm probably not going to have to talk about my hopes and dreams with this person. Although, just to be sure, I turned to Pretzel and I was like, hey, how would I say hopes and dreams in German? And she was like, you wouldn't? Like, okay, all right, I'm starting to feel a little bit better already. And so I start thinking about it in the car, what I'm going to say. I'm probably going to start with something like Guten Tag. They'll probably say Guten Tag back. And I go through this in different scenarios. And I'm feeling pretty good, feeling pretty confident. Get to the hotel in Switzerland, walk in. And then right as I'm getting ready to say Guten Tag, the receptionist says, Bonjour. And my brain shut down. And in the process of my brain shutting down, the only thing that I could think to respond with to this poor woman was, no hablo inglés, which is wrong. Right? It's wrong for multiple reasons. They said something in French, I responded in Spanish, and in Spanish I said, I don't speak English. I hablo inglés. I only hablo inglés. And the woman was very kind, though. She was like, do you want to speak English? And I was like, sì, grazie, prego, right? Still completely wrong. But the point of that story is to say that humor, in many ways, is like learning a language, right? Because there are some people who are fluent in the language of humor. It's something that they picked up while they were growing up. It's something maybe that they even studied or learned in some capacity, just like you would a language. And then there are other people who are at the no hablo inglés level, right? That they feel like they're going to stumble on their words or their ideas, or they just feel like they're quote unquote naturally funny. The good news is that wherever you are on that skill, you can get better. In fact, I want to get a sense of the room. Go ahead and share on a scale of 1 to 5 in the chat how you would rate your own skill of humor, right? So you're going to rate your own skill of humor. So a 1 is that you've never made anyone laugh ever. And a 5 is that you are constantly cracking people up that they tell you that you should do stand-up comedy. Let me see. So we got some 3s, some 4s. I like it. We got some 5s in there, which is pretty good. Did I see a negative number? So Darcy, I want to hear Darcy. That's funny. Oh, we got Nucha who's a 7. I love it. Lisa, that's the mindset to have. I'm a 2, but I keep trying. Robert's like, I'm a 5, but I feel gross saying it. It's okay. This is a safe space. You don't have to go out and tell everyone you're hilarious, but you can be honest with yourself. Interesting kind of recognition for Maritza is to recognize that she's a 5 in personal life, but not necessarily in the workplace, right? Those two things can be a little bit different. What the good news is that for anyone that's below a 4 or a 5, we're going to try to nudge you up a little bit with the remaining time that we have today. For anyone that's a 4 or 5, we're going to hopefully help you to be a little bit more intentional with how you bring that into your workplace as a professional skill. So the skill of humor looks like a couple of things. It ultimately breaks down to 3 things, what we call the pillars of humor. They are your sense of humor, not are you funny, but literally what do you find funny? Second, your ability to humor. This is the actual craft of creating and delivering, facilitating humor. This is the part that most people think that they can't do. And then ultimately your agency with humor, which is how to use it intentionally and strategically to achieve a specific outcome. So we're gonna go through a little bit in more detail each one, starting with the sense of humor. Now, in order to talk about how you develop your sense of humor, we wanna make sure we're on the same page with what we mean by it. So go ahead and drop in the chat, what comes to mind when you hear the word humor? Like when you heard and saw the topic today about confidence and humor, what did you think of? What comes to mind? What do you assume it means? What's the quickest saying? So we say, okay, let's laugh a little bit. Might be a giggle, might be something funny. For some of you, maybe you think of a very specific person, right? Purvi is on my side thinking of puns, but Fred is thinking about, yeah, the ability to bring things down a little bit, things making irony, specific types, etc. Like humor is all of these things. In fact, if you look at the dictionary definition, it says it's a comic, absurd, or incongruous quality causing amusement. So that includes comedy, right, under comic, but it's also something a little bit silly or something a little bit different. So for example, could be like this sign found in a taco shop. Education is important, but tacos is importanter. Right? Something just to be a little bit funny, something meant to be comedic. Or it might be slightly absurd, like this park, this picture that I've found in a park. And to me, this picture is very funny because this is the first stick figure that I have ever seen with a butt. Right? Now, I know some people look at that and they tell me it's clearly the other hand. Looks like a butt to me, right? So it's silly to me, made me smile. I took a picture of it. And it could also be just something that's a little bit different, right? Just something a little bit more playful or a little bit more fun, right? And these examples aren't necessarily laugh out loud, hysterical, the funniest thing you've ever seen, but they are something more interesting. And so when we're talking about humor today and humor in the workplace, we're not talking about making the workplace funny. We're talking about a proactive choice and making work a little bit more fun. And so your sense of humor starts by understanding just how broad humor can be and recognizing that the more we can find humor in, the more we can laugh at, the more we can kind of broaden what we see as humorous or fun, the more we just get to laugh and smile through life, right? It makes things a little bit more interesting, a little bit more fun. And there's a way you can formalize this, a way you can kind of improve your sense of humor is by doing something that most comedians do, which is to keep a humor notebook. One of the single most important thing you could start doing today if you wanted to see humor more in the world around you is to simply keep track of the things that make you laugh or smile, right? If you already keep a journal, then go ahead and just add a humor component to your journal every single day, just kind of like what made me laugh or smile today. And a humor notebook is simply a repository where anytime something makes you laugh or smile, you write it down. Anytime you have an interesting thought or a crazy thing happens to you at work or something ridiculous happens on a project, you write it down. Or even if you're in conversation, if you make someone else laugh, you can write it down. Like, don't do it in the moment. Like, don't make someone laugh and be like, oh my God, I am hysterical. Hold on just a second. Let me, right? Like, don't do it then, but reflect on a little bit later what it was. And by keeping a humor notebook, two things happen. The first thing that happens is that you start to remember all the funny things that happened to you. So if you're keeping a humor notebook and then next week you're leading a meeting and you're like, is there something that I can start with that adds a little bit of levity, get people to pay attention and kind of shake off the stress of the day? You can go back to the notebook and be like, oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about this. This is a story or something that I could share. The second more important thing that happens when you keep a humor notebook is it starts to change the way you see the things that happen to you. Because it's not that funny things happen to funny people. It's that funny people see the things that happen to them in a funny way. And by keeping a notebook, you start to recognize like, hey, this is something a little bit different. Maybe it could become humor a little bit later. To help you with that, I want to help you to process that or think about that right now. I want to do a very short writing exercise. You can do this just in the chat within Teams, or if you have kind of a notepad or a Word document up on your computer, you can do it there. If you want to do it on the Notes app on your phone, you can do that. If you've got a piece of paper in front of you, paper and a pen, you can do that way as well. What I want you to do is simply write the words, I love, ... And then I'm going to give you about a minute or so, and I want you to just stream of conscious fill in the blank of I love. You're just going to start listing things that you love, right? So you might be like, I love my family. I love my daughter. I love milkshakes. I love playing Baldur's Gate 3 with my college friends. I love going to the movies and sitting there on my own. Whatever it is, like whatever the first thing that comes to mind is that I love. You're going to write it in the chat. Go ahead and write it as one single thing. I'm already seeing some things in the chat, but you're going to create it as a list. So create it as one list before hitting enter. Or maybe you can hit shift before entering enter so it creates a list. But what I want you to do is I want you to write for 1 minute. The only rule to this exercise, doesn't matter what you put, is that you just keep writing until I tell you to stop. So even if you have to write like, I love that this exercise is going to be over soon because I don't know what else to say, but I'm only typing because he told me I have to keep typing until he tells me to say, like, you can write that if you need to, okay? So I'm going to put 30 seconds on or 60 seconds on the clock. Go ahead and begin and just write first thing that comes to mind with I love. All right, we'll do about 10 more seconds. All right, you can start to wrap up. And yeah, if you wrote it in the chat, feel free to hit enter and drop the list there. And we can share. I'm seeing some of these wonderful lists. And is there anyone willing to come off of mute and kind of read their list to us, whether you've written it there or written on a piece of paper? I just like hearing some of these lists sometimes. Anyone willing to share?
Sure, I'll share.
All right, fantastic.
All right.
Go ahead.
I love monkeys. I love kids. I guess that came hand in hand. I love water. I love the planet Earth. I love sunshine. I love spring. I love string quartets. I love extraordinary desserts. I love my family. I love dolphins. I love eating kolaches on the beach. I love being in the woods, listening to the leaves rustling in the wind. I love chicken Alfredo, spaghetti, pretty much any kind of noodle I love. I love cooking. I love screen-free family time. And I love a clean house.
Fantastic. That is a fantastic list. Can you share with me up again? There's a couple, right? I love string quartets, and what were the next couple after that?
Extraordinary desserts.
Ah, yes, that's what the one. What's an example of an extraordinary dessert?
Ricotta, passion fruit, cake. Yes.
Oh, that's amazing, right? Fantastic. I love that as a list. And so one, just writing of this list is, hopefully it wasn't too hard for you. But second, even by just creating this list, you can now start to explore things that you can say like, oh, I love these ideas. And within humor, a lot of times it's the specificity that makes people smile, laugh, or connect. And so if you're in a meeting, right, and let's say you're super excited about a software rollout. This is just me coming up with something off the top of my head, so it's probably pretty terrible. But if you're like, hey, I'm really excited about this, like almost as excited as I get when I'm presented with a ricotta raspberry cake or whatever it is that you said, like something super specific like that, it's a small little metaphor, but it's going to get people to lean in a little bit more. And the fact that you're sharing something that you love typically means you're going to be a little bit more excited about that particular presentation. Or if you're talking about string quartets, you're like, okay, hey, for this next project, in fact, we need to work a little bit like a string quartet. For those of you that don't know, a string quartet is made up of these particular instruments, and they all have a different role, right? People want to do this, they got to do that. Again, I don't know much about string quartets, but you can now create an interesting association. And by you creating an association about something that you're passionate or interested in, one, you get more excited when you present it or share it. And two, that passion or enthusiasm becomes contagious to other people, and you can build a little bit more of a connection. So even something as simple as this I love writing exercise can start to give you ideas of like, hey, is there anything from this list that I could find a way to incorporate a little bit more into my work to get this dual benefit, right? So that's simply by writing these things down, you're reminded of them. I would say, it's Tuesday. It's been potentially a long year already, right? If you love yourself some beautiful, wonderful desserts, maybe today's here. I'm giving you an excuse to go and eat a wonderful, extravagant, delicious, excellent dessert today. Not just you, Joanna, but anyone that likes desserts, right? So you can sometimes have these as excuses to go out and just share a little bit more. But thank you for that list. It's wonderful. Give me a quick, let's see, easy or hard in the chat in terms of how the exercise was. Was it easy to do? Was it hard to do? I just want to get a sense in the room. So give me an easy or hard in the chat. Easy, 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 right? For most people, it feels pretty easy. So simply by writing things down, right, you get a little bit more of this. Plus, we get a little bit of an added bonus of a little bit of gratitude when you start to write that list and you realize how many things you fall in love with. You're like, oh, okay, that's actually pretty good. Love it. So that's the first step, is to expand your sense of humor. That's where it starts. That's the most important thing in terms of taking away today, is just expanding a little bit more your sense of humor, because everything else builds off of that as our first pillar. Now, the second area, or the second pillar of humor, is your ability to humor. This is essentially, how do you actually create humor? And this is something that you can develop. And if you're thinking right now that that's all well and good for someone who does this for a living, well, let me tell you where I started, because it is true at this point that I've done over 1,000 shows as a stand-up comedian, improviser, and storyteller. I have spoken or performed in all 50 US states, in 30 countries, and on one planet. This one, and my TEDx talk on the skill of humor does have more than 15 million views. But I only tell you that because when I recently went to my high school reunion and people found out that I did comedy, they're like, but you're not funny. Because growing up, I was never the life of the party or the class clown. In fact, I recently found a personality assessment that I did my senior year of high school, and it said things like, Drew is a quiet, serious person. He is reserved and ill at ease among strangers, and he has less aptitude for work which involves frequent communication or involvement with unfamiliar people. Right? Not exactly the talk that you would, or the assessment that you would expect for someone who now speaks for a living and who's constantly around unfamiliar people. Right? But I realize that we are not our personality assessments, right? They're only a single assessment at a single point in time, but instead we're defined by our actions. And for me, when I was getting my degree in computer science and engineering at Ohio State, I also started doing improv and stand-up. And I didn't start doing it because I thought, you know who's funny? Me. You know who should listen to me? Strangers. No, I only did it because my best friend wanted to start an improv comedy group, needed people, and forced me to join. And over time, even though I was terrible at first, I started to realize that there's an art and science to humor, and that you can learn and practice both, right? The science part of it is things like devices, things like a comic triple, humor nem, literal lens, yes and, right? These are all different things, techniques that you can study. And then there is also the art part of it, the performance techniques. You can get better at confidence, at facial expressions, act outs, etc. The key to getting better at both of these things is you need quote unquote stage time. You ask any comedian how to get better and they'll tell you that you need to get on stage. Like if you want to learn any new skill, you can read all the books you want, you can watch videos on YouTube, you can do Duolingo every single day, but until you put it into practice, until you put it into conversation, you're not actually going to get any better. Now, the good news, though, is that as Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage. You don't have to actually literally get on stage, although it can help, right? You can absolutely take an improv class or try stand-up comedy at an open mic or a class or something like that. The programs that we do in person for some PDDs, et cetera, have a lot of interaction stuff, so you actually can build those skills. We also do workshops, et cetera. You can do those things, or you can also just say, okay, how can I get more experience day to day? If I'm getting ready to have a conversation or go into a meeting, can I pull a coworker aside or one of the members from PMI to say, hey, can I run a story by you to see if it resonates or not, right? At a minimum, just kind of say it out loud in the mirror. One of the most valuable techniques that I think can help you starting today is something called yes and. Go ahead and drop a yes and in the chat if you've heard of yes and before. I just want to get a sense of some people maybe you've experienced taking an applied improv workshop before. Give me a yes and in the chat if you've heard of yes and before. Okay, a few of you, some of you are like, yes, 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 right? So yes and, for those of you that don't know, yes and is the fundamental mindset of improvisation. It's how we as improvisers get on stage and make things up off the top of our head, right? Catherine's like, yeah, I took an improv class last year, which is fantastic, right? So yes and is how we make up stuff in a scene. And it's oftentimes juxtaposed against yes, but. Because so often, as we get more experience in the world, we tend to say yes, but, right? If someone comes to us with an idea, there's a yes and mindset to say, okay, I'm going to build off it, or there's yes, but. And yes, but is like, but what about this? Oh, but we don't have budget. Oh, but that's going to take a lot of time, right? What do you think just as a guess, what do you think, yes, but it was overused by the presenter for sure. I love this back and forth. What do you think we do more of day to day as project managers? Yes and or yes, but? Drop in the chat. What do you think we do more of, yes, but or yes, and? If those are your two options. Yes, but, yes, but, yes, but, right? And there's good reason for that, because yes, but is critical thinking. Yes, but is how we don't have scope creep and end up trying to give the entire world away for and still do everything on budget and on time, right? We have to say no to things. And yes, but is just a nice way to say no. In fact, in improvisation, we say a yes, but is a no in a tuxedo, right? It's a nice way to say no. And so I'm not saying yes, but is bad. In fact, it's incredibly valuable, right? Especially if you have a stakeholder that's coming to you with yet another requirement. It's a wonderful thing to be able to say yes, but to be able like, yes, we would love to add that to the scope of the project, but we have all of these other kind of criteria that we've met and we won't make it on time. So which one is more important, that we end things on time or that we add this new thing to the scope, right? So yes, but is a very polite way to say no. It's a wonderful phrase to be able to use. The challenge is that we tend to default to yes, but too much. And there are times when yes, and is valuable. For those that have taken it, or maybe as you think about the concept, let me explain. The concept of yes, and isn't about the literal phrase, because someone can be like, oh, we should do this. And you'd be like, yes, and you're an idiot, right? It's not about the literal phrase, but simply the mindset of yes, and is to take whatever the person said and find one thing from it and build off of it. Right? Not saying that you accept everything blindly that the person just said, but one thing and you're building off of it. So if that's the mindset, drop in the chat, when do you think it might be valuable to say yes and? Right? So Patricia's already like, maybe as a way to negotiate. Absolutely. If someone's bringing an idea, it's like, and we can think about that. Right? So often you don't have to always say, but sometimes it's just a change in the phrase. Brainstorming is a wonderful time for it as well. Practically always, Liz says, yeah. So yes and tends to feel way more positive. If you're saying yes and with another person, you tend to want to high five the other person. If you say yes but, you tend to want to high five the other person, but across their face, if they're saying yes but back to you, right? So it tends to feel more positive. So it really is about building. And so in those environments, when you leave a really positive, lasting impression, you want to use yes and. If you need to be very critical thinking, if you need to be more efficient, then yes, but is good, right? So it's not to say that either one is right or wrong. It's just to remind ourselves that this language exists. And in fact, it's this language that becomes really valuable. I just recently got an email a couple weeks ago from one of my contacts at NASA. And she was like, I just want to let you know that your spirit lives on, because this morning we started a meeting and we asked at the beginning of the meeting, we clarified if this is a yes and meeting or a yes but meeting, right? Simply having that language and sharing that with your team can save a lot of additional struggle and heartache and or like combativeness. So I would encourage you to take yes but and yes and as an idea back to your teams, teach it. You can do it as an exercise, etc. But just by having that shared language, you can then be on the same page for what type of meeting you need to be in or what type of framework you're looking for. So again, yes but isn't bad. It's just that we're saying yes, and we can say yes and a little bit more. Okay? So that's the technique that I'd strongly encourage you to walk away today with, to practice a little bit more, because it can have a tremendous impact on how you work. And finally, we get to the agency of humor. How do you actually use it to achieve a specific outcome? And this is what I started doing after that boring meeting that I led. After my manager reminded me about like, oh, hey, you can bring a little bit of fun into your work. I didn't want to become a comedian overnight, but the next day I had to write an email to everyone that was in that meeting. That was kind of a status report of where the project was. And by the time I got to the bottom of that email, I was like, how can I add a little bit of fun to this? And I decided to add a little PS at the bottom, just a little joke. So I included something like, PS, as a reward or perhaps punishment for reading this far, here's a joke. I spent the weekend locked in a cell. I wasn't arrested. I just couldn't figure out this one Excel formula. Right? Simple little joke. Not the best joke in the world, but something that's a little bit playful, something a little bit different. And I didn't think too much of it, but it actually made the process of writing the email more fun. So I decided to do that the next week. Add a little joke to the bottom of it. And then the week after, and then the week after. And I did that for multiple weeks in a row, multiple months. And then one day, I go in, I send that email, I go to lunch, I come back, and I have a bunch of replies to the email. And I'm like, oh no, like, did I offend someone? Are they telling me that I'm not taking my job seriously anymore? What's going on? And it turns out that I did offend people because I had forgotten to include a joke. And all the responses were like, hey, where was this week's joke? Hey, are you still doing the joke? Hey, I only read this because of the joke. And that's when I started to realize that me making my own work a little bit more fun was also making it fun for other people as well. Right? I didn't know if people actually read them, but they did. And in the process, no one there questioned my competence. No one took me less seriously because I added a little bit of humor, but instead it got them to actually read it. And that became the starting point where I started to incorporate more ways to use humor in my presentations. I started telling stories a little bit more to kick things off that were relevant to the topic that we're talking about. Started teaching my team members icebreakers. Started including pictures of myself in pretty much every presentation that I did, and became kind of a game of where's Drew Waldo and each one of my team meetings. It'd be like, okay, where is he going to be? Which picture? I know it's coming up. What's it going to happen, right? It gets them leaning in a little bit more. Each one of these things was a choice, not in terms of how do I be funny, but how can I use a different technique to get a different result? And a few years later, after starting to incorporate humor a lot more in my work, I found myself in another boring meeting at P&G. But this time I wasn't the one leading. It was someone else. I was sitting in the audience. And I had this thought while they're droning on and on and on. I was like, you know what? Someone needs to teach this person how to be more engaging. And then I thought, hey, maybe that someone should be me. As Gandhi almost said, be the comedian you wish to see in the world. And so that's what I started doing. I started to teach improv exercise and other humor techniques to people that I work with, and they enjoyed it. And that led me to starting my own organization. And that's what I've done for the last 15 years, to work with more than 700 organizations on how to use humor to be more effective. And one of the things that resonates with a lot of people in terms of how to use it intentionally is to follow what we call the humor map. If you want to get more intentional about how to use your humor, just start thinking about this each time you're getting ready to think about trying to use it. It's your medium, your audience, and purpose. Where medium is how you're going to execute the humor, is an email, phone call, conference call. The audience who's going to receive it What do they know? What do they need? What do they expect? And what's your relationship to them? Because humor that you're using with someone that you met for the very first time is very different than someone that you've been working with for 10 plus years. And then most important, it's why do you want to use humor? What's the goal behind it? We're going to skip that story for the sake of time because we want to keep you out, get you out of here on time. But ultimately, the idea is to use it with a little bit more intention. So let's come back to where we started. What did we talk about today? Well, you walked in recognizing that, hey, you got to be good at your job. But hopefully we're realizing that it's not good enough just to be good at it. You also have to be interesting, right? Because just because something is important doesn't mean that it's interesting. And so over the last hour, we've talked about how you can go from competent to more compelling using humor a little bit more. We said humor is a proactive choice in making our work a little bit more fun. We do it because we'd rather do things that are fun over not fun. And 3 steps that we can do to incorporate it more is to keep a humor notebook, to practice yes and to follow the humor map. But that's not all that we've talked about. You've also experienced what humor actually feels like. My intent is to try to demonstrate anything that I've done today, you all could easily do for yourself. Just like I did, I started with a story. You could start with a story. You could use interesting visuals, find a meme or an interesting picture online and incorporate it. You are welcome to create slides out of Microsoft Paint if you would like, or add a PS at the bottom of your email, or do icebreakers, etc. It all starts ultimately with a choice. Now, in terms of next steps, I recognize that there's a lot of different directions you could go from here. And we do have the 3 pillars that we've talked about. But within each one of those pillars, there's actually different competencies, what we call our humor intelligence, made up of 8 different competencies split among those 3 pillars related to appreciation, consideration, curation, creation, performance, facilitation, application, and empowerment. And every person tends to do some of these things naturally already, and maybe some of the other ones not so much. And so what we've developed is an assessment that if you go to humor.me/PMI-CIC or scan the QR code on your screen, let me bring that back. If you go there, you can take an assessment. And because you're part of PMI, you can get a completely free report from us. And in the report, you'll get this custom spider chart. And basically, it will tell you which of the competencies you do naturally, which ones you're maybe not so good at, and also where to start immediately. So it'll give you, based on your strengths, here are 5 things that you can do today to work on. Also, under the strengths, it'll tell you potential watch-outs to look for. That there might be certain things that if you naturally do already, if you're not conscious of, they might get a little bit in your way. So you can go to humor.me/PMI-CIC. And so to wrap up, one last thing before I go, one last story is I mentioned my TEDx talk a little bit before. Shout out to the person that said that they've seen the talk and that they enjoyed it. And it's interesting because if you look at the talk, it does have more than 16 million views and has over 200,000 likes, but it also has 4,000 dislikes. And the comments on the talk range from compliments about it to utter disbelief that anyone could possibly find it funny. Like some people are like, yeah, this dude was funny while explaining funny. That's good. This person I just imagined screaming because they're writing in all caps. Like, I think this video is genius and it's true what he said. Some people were comedic in their comments. Like this person said, you can hear the nerd in his voice. I appreciate that. Or this one stung a little bit. This dude's forehead is so big that it has its own sense of humor. Which, yeah, it's getting a little bit bigger every single day. And then there are people that did not like the talk, right? This guy is trying too hard to be funny. He's copied a lot from other comedians. I thought he was pretty okay. Actually, I support that. I appreciate that, Jack. But for every 5 positive comments, there is a negative one. This guy is funny. This guy isn't funny. Best TED Talk ever. This was useless. Brilliant, witty, and entertaining. Go back to engineering, please. And I'll be perfectly honest, the comments on the right used to bother me because I'm not a naturally funny person, have a little bit of the imposter syndrome to say, maybe not everyone's going to like my humor. But I started to realize over time that every ounce of energy that I give to the people on the right is energy that I'm not giving to people on the left that do resonate with my humor. And chances are, as you start using humor, there's going to be some people that love it, and there are going to be some people that either look at you a little bit weird or just roll their eyes. And the reality is that if you let the fear of the people that aren't going to resonate with your humor, if you let that fear prevent you from even trying, first of all, you're holding yourself back and you're guaranteeing that you're not getting any better, any more interesting, but you're also robbing yourself of joy. The reality is that you choose every single day how to do your work. So why not choose to be more productive, less stressed, and happier? Why not choose to get better results and have more fun? Why not choose humor that works? You all have been fantastic. I've been Andrew Tarvin. Thank you all so much for joining. I hope you enjoyed the session, and have a great, fantastic rest of your day.